April 16, 1985, a quiet, overcast Tuesday in Washington. A mid-level government employee walks into the Soviet embassy carrying an envelope. Inside that envelope are 2 pages of names. This single, seemingly mundane delivery will trigger one of the most catastrophic intelligence failures in modern history. The man carrying the envelope is Aldrich Ames, and he is about to condemn men to death. Betrayal rarely announces itself with a thunderclap. It creeps in through the quiet rationalizations of a desperate mind. For those whose lives were inscribed on those 2 pages, the morning felt exactly like any other. They were covert assets, men who had placed their absolute faith and their very survival in the hands of the U.S. government. That faith was being sold for $50,000. The architect of this devastation was not a master spy from a cinematic thriller. Aldrich Ames was a 34-year veteran of the CIA, a counterintelligence officer whose very job was to recruit Soviet spies and protect American operations. Historical records confirm that his colleagues viewed him as unremarkable, a man perpetually shadowed by a mild haze of alcohol and underperformance. Yet, behind this mediocre facade hid a profound capacity for deception. The descent into treason was paved by a crushing combination of personal and financial ruin. A bitter divorce had left him buried in alimony, while his new, expensive tastes demanded a lifestyle his government salary could never sustain. Instead of confronting his failures, he turned his resentment outward. The agency he served became the enemy, and the secrets he swore to protect became nothing more than currency to fund his salvation. The shockwaves of that initial delivery reached Moscow with terrifying speed. Within months, the most closely guarded American intelligence network inside the Soviet Union began to vanish. One by one, elite sources went dark, missing scheduled meetings, ignoring dead drops, and disappearing from their homes. A dead drop, a secret location where materials can be left for another party to retrieve without direct contact, suddenly became a trap. Panic gripped the highest echelons of American intelligence. The sudden systemic collapse of their Eastern Bloc operations could only mean one thing: a mole was burrowed deep within their own walls. The realization was sickening. The hunter was suddenly the hunted, and the very corridors of Langley, Virginia were tainted with suspicion. Imagine the isolation of the operatives stationed in hostile territory. They were isolated in a frozen landscape of paranoia, completely unaware that the safety net they relied upon had been cut. The psychological torment of waiting for a knock at the door, knowing that someone back home had traded their breath for a paycheck, is an unfathomable horror. Their trust was weaponized against them. The traitor did not stop with that first envelope. Emboldened by his sudden influx of cash and the apparent blindness of his superiors, he prepared a second, massive delivery. In June 1985, he handed over a plastic bag filled with classified documents exposing virtually every major American intelligence operation targeting the Soviets. The sheer volume of the betrayal was unprecedented. Those stolen files sealed the fates of at least 10 top-tier U.S. assets. Men like General Dmitry Polyakov, a high-ranking military intelligence officer who had risked his life for decades to provide America with crucial strategic insights, were dragged into the nightmare. They were arrested, subjected to brutal interrogations, and ultimately executed in the grim, blood-stained basements of the Lubyanka prison. While blood pooled in Moscow, wealth flowed in Washington. The traitor's lifestyle transformed with shocking brazenness. He purchased a $500,000 house in cash, drove a luxury Jaguar, and wore tailored suits that far exceeded his pay grade. Court documents indicate that over the course of his espionage, he received an estimated $4.6 million. It is a chilling testament to human compartmentalization that a man can sip fine wine paid for with blood money. He convinced himself that the men he compromised were merely players in a grand, cynical game, stripping them of their humanity to protect his own fragile ego. This narcissistic abuse of his power, a dynamic where a person exploits and endangers others to serve their own inflated sense of entitlement, blinded him to the atrocity of his actions. Despite the glaring red flags of his newfound extravagance, the agency's internal investigations moved with agonizing slowness. Institutional blindness, a stubborn refusal to believe that one of their own could commit such treason, provided him with a shield of deniability. The initial task forces chased shadows, looking for technical breaches or complex electronic surveillance, ignoring the glaring human failures sitting in their own cafeteria. The families of the fallen operatives were left in an agonizing limbo. Wives and children watched their loved ones vanish into the maw of the Soviet state machine, receiving only cold silence or fabricated stories from the government that had promised to protect them. The collateral damage of the deception ripped through generations, leaving a legacy of unanswered questions and unhealed wounds. The geopolitical landscape violently shifted, but the espionage continued. The fall of the Soviet Union in 1991 did not stop the flow of secrets. Ames seamlessly transitioned his loyalties, offering his services to the newly formed Russia intelligence apparatus. The empire had crumbled, but the market for betrayal remained incredibly lucrative. The mechanics of his treason became a grim routine. He would mark a specific mail stop in Washington with a piece of chalk to signal a loaded dead drop, leaving highly classified documents hidden under bridges or in hollowed-out logs. He treated the nation's most sensitive secrets with the casual indifference of a man taking out the trash. But the quiet pursuit of truth was finally gaining ground. A joint task force, bringing together the CIA and the FBI, began to meticulously assemble the puzzle pieces. They looked past the institutional biases and focused on the undeniable paper trail of his finances. Unexplained bank deposits, perfectly timed with his meetings with foreign handlers, began to paint a damning, undeniable portrait. The investigators employed a technique they called financial profiling, painstakingly matching his astronomical spending to his modest legitimate income. The numbers did not lie. The discrepancy was a chasm that could only be filled by foreign gold. The net was finally, silently, being drawn closed around the architect of the disaster. By late 1993, the surveillance was suffocating. Agents watched his every move, tracking his car, tapping his phones, and monitoring his computer. They observed him placing the chalk marks, they retrieved the garbage from his home, and they listened to his increasingly paranoid conversations. The illusion of his invincibility was fracturing. The morning of February 21, 1994, arrived with cold finality. As he left his lavish home, preparing to travel to a conference where investigators feared he might defect, FBI vehicles swarmed his Jaguar. The arrest was swift and unceremonious. The man who had operated in the shadows for nearly a decade was suddenly thrust into the blinding light of accountability. The unmasking of the traitor sent shockwaves through the American public and the global intelligence community. The sheer scale of the compromise was staggering. He had revealed the identities of hundreds of covert operatives, crippled technical collection systems, and fundamentally altered the balance of power during the closing acts of the Cold War. The damage was incalculable. For the intelligence officers who had worked beside him, the revelation was a deeply personal violation. They had shared meals, confided frustrations, and trusted him with their lives. Realizing that the man at the next desk was actively orchestrating the murder of their sources shattered their fundamental belief in their own institution. The betrayal eroded the very foundation of their professional existence. During his interrogations and subsequent trial, he offered little in the way of genuine remorse. He attempted to justify his actions by claiming the Cold War was a farce, a bureaucratic game played by out-of-touch elites. This attempt to intellectualize his treason was a final insult to the men who had faced firing squads because of his greed. It laid bare the ultimate tragedy of a man who valued his own comfort over human life. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A sterile cell replaced the luxurious home bought with the lives of others. The legal system had delivered its verdict, locking him away in a high-security facility where his secrets could no longer be monetized. Yet, true justice remained an elusive, hollow concept for the families of the dead. The legacy of this profound breach extends far beyond the historical record. It serves as a grim cautionary tale about the vulnerabilities inherent in any system that relies on human integrity. The most sophisticated security protocols in the world are meaningless if the heart of the protector has been corrupted by greed and resentment. The ghosts of the compromised assets still linger in the silent spaces of intelligence history. Their sacrifice, forced upon them by a man they never met, demands remembrance. They are the true cost of espionage, the human collateral in a shadow war fought by men who trade lives for leverage. Ultimately, this story is not just about stolen files or clandestine meetings. It is a terrifying exploration of how easily a moral compass can shatter, and how a single individual, armed with nothing but secrets and a willingness to sell them, can alter the course of history. The scars of that betrayal remain permanently etched into the fabric of national security, a dark reminder of the enemy within.